Back in the States, we were operating a fleet of 82-foot cutters on search and rescue missions along our own coastline. These boats were self-sufficient. They could do almost anything. The 82-footer was air-conditioned, so the crew could stay comfortable no matter what the climate outside. This would be especially important in the hot, muggy coastal regions of Vietnam. Food? With our freezers, we could keep plenty of chow on board, enough for a week or even more at sea if we had to stay out that long. Yep, we were well stocked. Only thing to be added was a little imagination from the cook. Each of our 82-footers had radar on board to help us find vessels in distress. We kept pretty busy enforcing our maritime laws and looking after the safety and well-being of the people who use our waters. I guess you'd have to say we were made to order for the patrol and inspection job to be done in Vietnam. So it was no real surprise to any of us when the orders came.
The hardest part's always saying goodbye to the kids. It's not easy to explain to them or their mothers why you have to go off to war. But those of us who had to go understood this was our job. And some of us older types had been training for this moment for more than 20 years, ever since the last time the Coast Guard went to war. The Coast Guard Receiving Center at Alameda, California was the gathering point for this first group of us. And here we learned we were the first members of newly commissioned Coast Guard Squadron 1. We also learned that we would soon move on from Alameda to begin special training at the Navy's Amphibious Training Base Pacific, TRANH, down near San Diego. But there were a few details to be attended to first. We were all experienced men, and most of us remembered what you had to go through for this kind of emergency assignment. It really brought back memories. Ouch. You've heard the expression, tell it to the Marines? Well, at TRANH, it was the Marines' turn to do the talking. And they were our instructors, and there was a lot they had to tell us about the newer weapons being used in Vietnam, like the M14 rifle, the replacement for the old M1 of World War II. We took the M14 apart and put it back together again. Then we went out to the range to see if we remembered how to fire a rifle. So we were a little rusty at first, but we'd get better. There, told you so. One weapon we'd get to know very well was the .50 caliber machine gun. At that very moment, each of our 82-footers was being fitted out with 4 .50 caliber gun mounts. The main battery would be an ingenious weapon designed by a Coast Guard officer, a .50 riding piggyback on an 81mm mortar. It would be used on many small naval craft operating in Vietnam.
Man, if you think I handle those 81mm shells like they were hen's eggs, you're right. Guess that's why they decided the cook ought to be a gunner in his spare time. That's the way it is in the Coast Guard. Like you get out there in the range, and you never know who's going to be working beside you. Might be a chief, or even one of the officers. There's no exclusive job club in this kind of business. We all learn a lot of different jobs, and we learn them together. Because that's the way we work in the Coast Guard, together. They didn't leave anything out, I'll tell you. But all this was just leading up to the main event, survival training.
Okay, so you ask, why were they interested in teaching us survival up here in the mountains? Well, look at it this way. The main object is to learn to stay alive. And if one of our cutters ever got run aground, well, we might just have to take to the hills or to the jungle. So we learned to tell what plant life we could eat and what we couldn't. Greens, the instructor called them. Almost made them sound appetizing. But let me tell you, they weren't. They'd keep us alive, though, and that was the real point. course, we had to know how to prepare an animal if we were lucky enough to kill one. This was old hat to those of us who were hunters, but to the rest of the group, it was information that could be very important where we were going. Like learning about skinning a rabbit. Most of the guys didn't know you can tell if it's good to eat by the color of its liver. Bright red and it's down the hatch. But if it's gray, better look elsewhere for chow, old buddy.
The climax of all this stateside training was called resistance to interrogation. This was a little play acting we all knew was coming and thought we were ready for. But when it happened, wow. After the first 20 seconds, as far as we were concerned, it was for real. The idea was to get us used to the way we might be treated if we were captured. And I'd say they got the point across all too convincingly. All of a sudden, that old Navy tradition, don't give up the ship, took on a special modern significance. Conveniently, the training included a rescue by friendly natives. We all took off for the bush like our lives really did depend on it. Don't think they didn't have a time convincing us to come back when the game was over. We just weren't quite ready to trade our freedom for a ride back to camp in that truck. And when it all ended, every man among us agreed that this had been the most impressive training exercise he'd ever been subjected to. We were all better men for having gone through it, and we were ready now to move on to the real battle, 10,000 miles away in Vietnam.